Hello, it's Catherine here from Inky Fingered Cat, back with Christmas in July. This one I had a bit of a recording fail. I think I've done really well to get to this point in the month before I had a recording fail. So you do miss a little bit later on, but it's only assembly and I do manage to realise I'm not recording. So I do manage to show you what I've done. So I started with 3 distress oxide backgrounds that I just got out of the tub of backgrounds that I make when I'm feeling like I just want to get inky. And I just chose these 3. They were not exactly the same colours, but there was obviously some similarities to the colours, and I thought that they would work quite well with these floral images. The stamp set I'm using is a stamp set from Creative Stamping magazine from years ago, and I have used and used and used these floral stamps so much over the years, it's ridiculous. So anyway, I stamped them on one side of the panel towards the edge, and now I'm just coming in with a few, one of the big cluster type stamps, and now I'm just coming in with some of the smaller stamps and doing the same. And for each of them I am embossing in gold distress powder. Why have I said that? Gold embossing powder. I do need to get some more of that gold, it's running quite low. So at some point that's got to go on the shopping list. So I've just chosen some other images, sort of like leaf images and a flower image to go in the other side of that panel. And that's all 3 of them stamped, embossed and heated. So now I'm coming in with some distress oxides in aged mahogany. I do use fired brick later, peeled paint, mowed lawn, and then because I haven't got a sort of more evergreeny kind of colour in my distress oxides, I do go to pine needles in distress inks. So you can layer them on top of distress oxides, and because they're translucent they kind of work with the oxides underneath, so it doesn't really, you can't really tell that they're different. Now I love watercolouring with the distress oxides because they're so chalky and they just leave a lovely texture, especially when you're doing them with the embossing powder. You need to remember to kind of wipe them off afterwards when they're all dry, to make sure that you've taken anything off, which I did do, but again that was off camera much later on. So I'm having a jolly good time just basically painting all of those, and you can see there when I am mopping up, I mop up with a piece of cardstock, so I am going to use that ink that I've put onto another piece as another background panel at some point, or maybe to die cut or something. I try not to waste the ink that I've got on my desk and make a new background at the same time. So here I have pulled in, as I say, the fired brick, I think, which is just a slightly more reddy ink, but because these are the distress oxides and this is still the background I'm working on at this point, it's not particularly vibrant. And you can see here I've now brought in that distress ink in pine needles. Okay, we're going to go into super speedy mode now, just because you don't need to see this and there's no detail that you're going to be missing. It's literally just me tidying up, cleaning up, finishing off that panel that's a distress ink panel. Now I'm going to take that same image again and I am going to heat emboss it onto some quite thick hot pressed watercolour cardstock, and this is where I made a bit of an error of judgment, because even though I knew what I was wanting to do with this, I totally forgot about the technique of doing it. So what I should have done is stamped it on separate pieces of cardstock in exactly the same placement and left the stamp in the same place, and then I would have been able to go quite easily back in afterwards and heat emboss, like stamp it again and heat emboss over the directly. Instead I have to fiddle around getting the stamps in the right place. One of the leaf sprigs isn't quite in the right place when I stamp it the second time with the embossing, but it is quite a forgiving technique. So I would suggest that you do as I say when you do this technique and not what I actually did there. So the plan is you're meant to keep the stamp in the stamp platform and then re-stamp it again over the top once you've done your colouring. Now, this always looks a hot mess. I did another card a couple of days ago using the same sort of technique of very messy watercolouring to colour the image, and then you heat emboss over the top, and it just sort of like tidies it up and makes it look really cool. So I'm doing exactly the same thing here. Obviously, because it's now onto watercolour cardstock and it's a cream base, well, it's a white base, but it's not quite white. This is making the colours more true than they are on those background panels. But again, the colour sort of like goes back a little bit. It does sort of dull and doesn't look quite as vibrant at the end once it's all dry. And also once the line art is back in with the heat embossing, it's absolutely fine. So again, I am still working on that future background panel, picking up all of that ink, and I'm just drying it all off to make sure that it's all dry before I start going back in again with my stamp to heat emboss. The first one was easy because that tiny little flower was one that I didn't take out of the stamp platform, so that one worked exactly as it should do, whereas these, it tends to get a little bit more fiddly, and I'm slightly off on that second one that I've done of the leaf sprig. It won't matter, as I say, although I actually ended up only making 2 cards, and the reason for that is I was doing this at night and I ran out of time and energy, so I have put all the pieces that are left over in a pouch to do at another point, and that's where those loose, those 3 sprigs of leaves and berries and the flower will get used, and I'll do that at another point. All I do when I don't finish a project is I put it in a little pouch, put it to one side, and I'll come back to it at another point. That could be in 2 days' time, it could be in 6 months, who knows, who knows. I'm sure it'll be sooner rather than later though. Okay, so you can see here I have heat embossed over the top, and it just really cleans up those images. And now we go into fussy cutting. So I am going to fussy cut all these bits and pieces out. I've fussy cut them with a small border, and then about halfway through the fussy cutting I think, oh, you don't want to watch all of this, so I turn the camera off. And then after I've finished the fussy cutting, I turn the camera back on, except for I don't actually remember to press record. So this is where I've realised I've not pressed record, and I'm at the point of heat embossing my sentiments. So at this point I have put together the 2 cards that I'm going to make today, which are these 2, and I am now just heat embossing, choosing how to die cut out my sentiments, and I go through a couple of different options. I have mounted my cards that I've made on this mossy meadow green and a sheet of white, so they've got a little bit of a border. So I'm just now bringing in that mossy meadow for the that label, so that it just pops out the top and the bottom. I just kept them fairly flat as cards, so there is a little bit of dimension on the second card I'm about to do now underneath the flower, but it's only a tiny amount, it's just some scrap cardstock I put underneath it. But the other one I just kept really flat. I've not done added foam or anything like that. The sentiments I chose were from the Christmas to Remember stamp set, and I'm using the dies that kind of coordinate with, and I am just adding a couple of layers underneath to make sure that it's a bit more sturdy. For this white one, I don't bother adding green to this one. And I just, yeah, as I said, kept it fairly simple. For both of them, I did add some gems on. So I added the Spellbinders gold gems, and they just kind of finished them off. And then I realised it's quite a dark coloured cardstock, so inside the card I took some sheets of white, just stuck them in, and then just took that flower stamp and with the aged mahogany did a bit of stamping. So that was me popping the other bits and pieces to one side into a pouch so that they're there for next time. I love how these came out. I'm really sorry that the video doesn't show me assembling them, but I promise you didn't miss much. Please do give me a thumbs up if you like them. Obviously thumbs down if you didn't, that's fair enough. We're all entitled to our opinions, and they are quite messy with those distress oxide backgrounds. So please do leave me a comment below if it's your style of crafting or if it's something that you tend to steer clear of. Subscribe if you want to see more. And until next time, goodbye.